Gender Justice Initiative. Brinda Adige pioneered India's first child protection helpline called Makkala Sahayavani in the Bangalore Police Commissioner's Office, currently the Director of Global Concern India. Meera K, co-founder and trustee, Urvani Foundation. We can have a slightly louder round of applause, please. And the panel is going to be moderated by Padma Venkatraman, Head Communications and Design at the Indian Institute for Human Settlements. Over to you, Padma.
My badge is IIHS. Hi, good afternoon. I was only half joking when I was telling older colleagues there that all of us were sitting right at the back and we were listening to the conversation here. And sometimes it's not just this physical bridge or that divide or distance between different sectors. So welcome to the social sector, I suppose. And we're talking about trust. It was also interesting because when we talk about words like, or concepts like innovation, we talk about, what were the other keywords? Brand building. Authenticity. So all of that, right? Relevance, etc. So things that we talk about, concepts that we talk about. And somehow you can attach something very real to them, right? When you think about innovation, you think of a lot of action. You think of things that are happening. You think of policies and schemes, etc., etc. And when we talk about trust, for some reason, it just sits somewhere within feeling. And for some reason, it doesn't have to be quantified. It doesn't have to be explained. It doesn't have to be held accountable, right? And it sits within that realm of feeling. So we're happy to be talking about the deficit in trust, which I think is simply the state of the world, the way it is at the moment. And this, I think, is both, like I said, as a larger overarching theme globally and in different countries, and I guess across sectors. I'm going to jump right into introductions, and I'm just going to introduce the panel and then ask them one question. They were very kind to have shared with me the one thing that you will not find on the LinkedIn panel. I said panel instead of profile. Okay, Shruti. Shruti is co-founder and CEO at Foundation for Mother and Child Health, India. Shruti works at the intersection of technology, data, and frontline health and nutrition. And when I asked Shruti what is the one thing that you won't see on her LinkedIn profile, she says that she uses writing as a way to gain clarity. Priya Vardarajan founded Durga, I'm Every Woman, a nationally recognized gender justice initiative that reimagines how women and girls belong in public spaces, including introducing India's first panic alarm system in public transport. When I asked her, Priya said, she's anchored several prime ministerial and heads of state visits and has learned to play with power and ego on a different plane. And therefore, her ongoing, very conscious, deliberate efforts to dismantle patriarchy and power. Brinda Adige is Director of Global Concern India, working with children from highly marginalized communities, navigating everything from trafficking, child labor to schooling. Brinda works with children and families, navigating, some of the hardest things that I don't think we can even imagine. And like we were talking over lunch, both in the proximity and the shadow of both state and the police. One thing she says, she has successfully challenged and won 3 legal cases that were falsely filed against her by a bench of magistrates, prevailing in both the sessions and the high courts. The first case in India, Brinda Adige versus State of Karnataka against the Child Welfare Committee, is now taught in law school. See, I did say I would judge them if they didn't applaud, and they did. Meera is Managing Trustee at Urvani Foundation, co-founder of Citizen Matters in Open City. Meera works in civic media and open data, helping people make sense of their cities and governments. One thing about Meera that she says you will not see on her LinkedIn profile is that she doesn't just write or is passionate about the topics that she espouses, but she volunteers in her neighborhood. of course, in her RWA and local groups working on issues like garbage, road, lakes, etc. She calls it her grassroots learning lab. So Meera, let me start with you. Very short, crisp response is what I'm hoping for. What's one way educated urban readers, because all of us believe we are, how do we fool ourselves into thinking that we are informed citizens when actually we're not?
Good afternoon, everybody. So one observation I'd like to share is how all of us are now mixing up exposure with understanding, right? We are exposed to so many things. We are aware of things. We skim across, different kind of media. How many of you, by the way, read newspapers? Okay, 3.5 hands. But between, traditional media or television, anybody? No. Right? So between that, traditional media, where, along with social media, we're just skimming across things, we're scrolling, we're doom scrolling. But really, to take the time to really understand issues is not something we have, right? The earlier panel talked about the time we may be watching Family Man or all of these various Netflix shows. But when you talk about public affairs or social issues, how much of time do we really spend? Because these are complex issues. So what we read is we understand the overall big picture maybe, but really to dive deep into it is very different because these are very, very complex issues. So we complain about potholes, but really these are systemic. It is only a symptom. So all the stuff that we see are symptomatic to really understand the root cause, to understand the intersectionality of these issues, how it's related to corruption, how it's related to the contracting system, to the electoral funding system. So many, many things are there, and this is something I think we start to understand only when we get involved to really dive deeper into it. So this is what I want to
It's
share.
also interesting, no, when you talk about the things that these are very complex issues, and sooner or later they come back to us. They do impact our lives. You may not feel it or sense it today, but one way or the other, and what you were saying at the end, your vote counts, and it counts for all of these reasons, and you will vote right if you know what the issues are. Yeah, thanks. Brinda, what's one assumption people make about, I'm going to use the double quotes, vulnerable children, that actually makes your work harder?
Yes. So one of the first assumptions that most people make of vulnerable children or vulnerable women or vulnerable people, they're all dumb. Yeah? Well, the school is not a place for them. They will not be able to study. The other thing is the topic. They are not trustworthy. You can't trust them. You see, they could get into anything. These are the ones who do all of those pickpocket, stealing, whatever. So that becomes such a huge issue because now, first and foremost, when you go into the community, you have to earn their trust. Yeah? To say that I've come here to do some work because we are not doling out anything. If you dole out and go away, they are happy with you and they don't mind. But when you are staying there, you're standing, you're asking questions and you're saying, why have you not stood up for something? Why have you not sent your child to school? Why did you not go there and ask the teacher, admit my child? Or a domestic worker, why did you not ask for a holiday? Once a week is a constitutional right. I know there are various kinds of labor laws. Why would you not ask your employer that you want to go early today because you can visit your child in school and be in the parent-teacher meeting? And the first thing is, she doesn't trust me. She thinks I tell lies. He thinks I tell lies. So this whole assumption that we are talking of and this trust deficit comes from a position of power. Always. And it doesn't matter because we are all at different levels and there's always somebody more powerful than us. There's always somebody much more high-handed. Sometimes, I think I'm very high-handed, but you'll suddenly feel somebody else is over there. And that person feels he or she has a right to doubt you, question you, and make assumptions about you. even before you opened your mouth to say anything. So that is our break, just not mine, I'm sure all of us over here.
Yep.
Our biggest challenge now to say, oh, so you're going to send them to school. Why the government is not doing it? Should I
Correct.
answer that question for you?
Yep.
Why are they on the streets? Why are they being sold and who's buying them? So it's a whole lot of things where this assumption comes from that position of power, and that power is our patriarchal upbringing, which we have internalized and refuse to question whether we are men, women, or trans persons.
Sure. And it's not just patriarchal, and we know this because the intersections and the complexities lie in so many layers, whether it is gender, whether it is caste, very, very strongly that we refuse to recognize.
Yeah.
So yes, similar vein, Priya, what is the one thing about almost everyone in this room, and we're all, yeah, I was going to say we're all women, but most of us are women here. What do you think we all think we understand about women's safety and perhaps don't?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for this question. I'm just going one step back to also say that when we talk about patriarchy, right, it's not just patriarchy, it's Brahminical patriarchy, right? And therefore, that plural, intersectional experience is very critical, even when we're talking about issues of safety. Because what is safety for me would be very different for the kind of people that Brinda was talking about, right? And therefore, just to be able to understand that it is a constitutional right, it is a human right, and encroaching into someone else's space is a violation are very, very fundamental things that people like all of us who come with historic privilege and entitlement should understand, right? And therefore, I feel very pained that the conversation of safety is always with people who feel unsafe and not with people who don't even need to think about safety, who are cis-het men today, right? They don't need to think about safety, and they are the ones who will say, why are you making such a big deal about it, right? And so unless and until that changes, and unless and until we have people who hold power in different spaces, willing to engage, willing to participate, willing to question themselves and the spaces and privilege they come from, all of us will continue to keep thinking and talking and expressing the safety or the lack of it all the time. And I feel, for me, that is very, very critical to break.
Multi-layered, not easy to break. And again, goes back to what Meera was saying in terms of, it begins with just reading, understanding, being interested. Another layer, especially given the event that we're at, and this one is for you, Shruti. What's the common mistake that we make when we say, tech can fix this?
I think it's what everyone said. Firstly, hi everybody, thank you for being here. It's what everybody said. This is so complex, and we think that tech can fix it. If tech could fix it, it would have been fixed long ago.
Long ago.
Right? Tech is not going to fix anything. We need to fix this. We need to heal systems. But typically, I feel as people who come into the sector and say, I'm going to build tech for this, we use the same metrics in some ways that we use for corporates. So I'll give you an example. So for example, when we build out chatbots, in the corporate, you would say chatbots, I want to see number of engagements. And therefore, when you're in our sector, it probably is not the number of engagements, it's the quality of the engagement, right? That one conversation could change a person's life, and that is just as valuable as 20 conversations. But we are always going behind 20 conversations and not looking at that one conversation that truly transformed a life. So I think the same metrics don't apply, and added to that all the layers that we spoke about, right? Tech sits on this. So till this is fixed, the base is fixed, it doesn't matter what we build.
So true. I just want to turn it around to, the audience here. How many of you have never raised a complaint, whether it is at work, with, your local community, to the police, in courts, or whatever, for any reason? You're the only one that has never raised a complaint. Everyone else has raised a complaint somewhere or the other, yeah? Okay, I see hands going up quietly, gently. And everyone else has raised a complaint in different fora. Right? So quick question, if we may. Right? Did you do it knowing or trusting the system? And did the system reward you just with a show of hands? Yes, the complaint was resolved, so to speak. In how many cases, if you could just raise your hands, the complaint that you raised was resolved? None. Okay, so I guess we could move on to the entire thing centering trust deficit, right? Now, as people, yeah, I think all of us, you'll see vigorous nods here across the panel. And I think therein sits the idea of trust deficit as well, right? Sometimes we tend to divorce the people that we are as individuals, as citizens, and confuse it with the institutions that we are a part of and whose brands we're trying to build or whose products we're trying to build, right? And not kind of bringing the two together, at least in our own imaginations, and then in the way that we design things. The next section, and I'm going to call it that, right, is that we work inherently trying to build trust, right, for each of our stakeholders. And for us, sometimes our stakeholders could be anyone from your funder all the way to the community, right? Can you give me one real example, not frameworks, not concepts, real example of where you have failed, where that trust is broken and you had to do something to regain it? The reason I ask this question is also we talk about trust being fragile, but we don't talk about the amount of effort that it takes. I mean, what breaks in that moment when trust is broken? That, again, like you were saying, Priya, is different for different people. And the quality of that trust could mean the difference between, in some cases, life and death. Meera, you want to go first, or Priya?
I'm just wondering. So
Anti-establishment.
maybe a very simple example from many years ago. So one of our, so we started, Urvani itself was originally started as a media startup and then evolved into a civic nonprofit. We've continued working in the civic space. So very early days, we had one of our directors was going to contest elections. So until then, we'd been very strong. I mean, clearly non-partisan. We've been very, we've been very careful about building our credibility, right? And so there were quite a few people asking question. Okay, no, that becomes how will you ensure that your storytelling, your journalism, and your narrative are independent and so on. So this was perhaps the only time we've had those kind of questions because quite, very quickly we kind of shared our internal processes. We always had like a code of conduct, ethics and, all the principles hard-coded. And after this question, we actually sat, and my co-founder and I sat down and wrote our DNA. What do we believe in? What are the values we believe in? And how do we why do we make the kind of choices we do? And how do we make decisions, etc.? And full disclosure. So whenever, for example, over the years, we've had like some 15,000 articles we've published. And every point, if there is a connection with one of the sources or one of the writers with our organization or about the topic, we disclose all that. Something as simple as that has managed to kind of ensure that we, retain that the trust of our readership and the community. So this is something we've been very careful about. If there is nothing else, I think we've built that credibility and retained that. So full disclosure, putting all of this in place, documenting it, sharing, everybody who joins the team actually goes through this DNA document saying this is what we believe in. And many of this actually are publicly available on the site. You can actually see this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. So that really helps.
Yeah, I just want to take a second about trust, right? And it's not about the social impact sector alone that you have trust deficit. Trust is about people, and we're all people. We work in all different sectors, and the way we are used to dealing with trust or the deficit of it in, say, a capitalistic economy is by showing profit, right? Is by showing the power of money and saying that I'm compliant and I've done whatever I had to and this is how I've earned my money. And the entire world has been structured to understand and accept a capitalistic connotation of building and bridging trust. When it comes to social impact, you also notice that where does social impact really work? In places where there's a deficit of growth, there's a deficit of human development indices, and where there has been a lot of oppression from capitalistic spaces, right? So in social impact, who's asking for these questions, right? Am I asking Shruti about I don't trust the work you do, or is any of us asking each other we don't trust your impact? It's again capitalism that questions us on where's your impact, how do you prove it, how do I know your team's working somewhere? So trust deficit does not come from a sector. It again comes back to the same point that Brinda made, which is who has power, and the power we understand today is money and politics, right? And therefore for us, one such instance was 5 years ago during the pandemic. We had just raised some money from an institutional donor, and they wanted to know if every penny they gave or every rupee they gave is actually translating to our team going to the field. And they didn't care about what is the outcome, because we work with people in public spaces. Everyone who has any idea of common sense during the pandemic, nothing was happening in public spaces. And therefore, we needed to prove to our donor that work is happening on the ground, and we had to give daily reports. And I had to tell the donor that I am not in the business of vaccination. What kind of daily report am I going to give you? Our work is on behavior change. And right now, the behavior change that we imagined in public spaces, the very idea of public space has been redefined to go into Zooms and G-Meets and this and that, which we're all trying to, sort of wrap our heads around. There were several conversations, but we had to continue to build reports where we had to say we did 2 sessions today and half a session yesterday and 4 sessions are planned tomorrow. This is my team. You see the pain point that power brings with, I can ask you anything, including your blood group and your kidneys, and it is your responsibility to give to me. I think a lot of our work is to be able to shift those dynamics and build trust because we are humans and not because we have given someone money, and that's an example I wanted to bring, but there's a lot of work that needs to get done around it.
Yeah, just to add to it, I think it's important to understand why this, of course, there's a power equation there, but it's also about the experiences that each of these entities are bringing into the table. You have somebody who's actually working on the ground versus somebody who's putting in the money who comes from perhaps a business background or an MBA background. So a lot of donor organizations don't necessarily have people who have had those life experiences of change making. And therefore they understand metrics, they understand reports, but to actually see this slow process of change on the ground is very, very different. So this is something which is why I keep talking about the importance of real life experiences. Unless you've been through that experience, you've seen what's happening to communities, to people on the ground, it's very hard to really understand how organizations are working as well. So that's where the trust factor comes in, because you don't relate to this at all.
Shall I? So there are 2 things here. Are women inherently someone who trusts each other as women? I make the choice that I want to trust. Are men not so much of, not so trustworthy? But if you ask that question, most men will say, no, we trust all women. But they come with a suspicion at all points of time. Now, when you're looking at social impact, two things that we need to understand. One is doing good, which CSR is doing. One is being good. That's the social impact. How would you measure me being good? Because you haven't even reached that road yet. You're still with all kinds of numbers and probably different graphs, and you've not reached that space where you can't imagine that this is being good. So being good, A is individually me being good, my organization being good. But B is for you to believe. Now if you have, not you, okay, I'm talking about the people out. But if you have some deficiency, how can I fill it up? How can I correct it? How can I make that right? Because that is a dual responsibility you're placing on me. And that's unfair, especially from the space that we come from. Because we are already struggling. We're struggling to tell you that, every minute there is a girl who's being sold in India. Rubbish. Where's the data? It will be like the Delhi air. There's one data put by somebody else and there's another data put by the citizens. Which one do you want to believe in? So we want to ask this question. Why is it that you assume, or presume, first-hand itself, that, we are giving them money, so they better answer. They better tell us. Do you know how difficult it is when we go onto the streets? In fact, during COVID, we had ASHA workers. This is just an example story that I'm giving you. We've had inspectors, doctors, all of them coming and saying, take the vaccine, take the vaccine. So I work in one of these most crowded, largest slums in Bangalore, very close to Koramangala. So suddenly we've come after distributing ration and we are seeing some 200-300 women standing there. So we asked, why are you all standing here? You must tell us. So they're telling me in Tamil and some in Kannada, you tell us whether we should take that injection or not. 5 qualified people with big badges. I am government. So they have not yet earned the trust with whatever badge they have. Yeah. But the trustworthiness of the organization that I work with, if you say, we will take it. Can you imagine the burden that we are carrying? Even if I tell one person take the vaccine, and for whatever comorbidities that person might have, something goes wrong, the government doesn't take responsibility there. So when we talk of trust deficit, we want to ask this question: from where and how dare? Because the NGO section is not supposed to dare. The NGO section is always, please.
Hat in hand.
So when I saw this topic, I said, I don't know if I will be diplomatic. Shall I speak the truth? So my friend said, well, they're talking about trust deficit. If you don't speak the truth, then why are you going there? So I have to share these with you because constantly we are battered with these kind of things. And then you tell, you don't get funding, because just now I was talking for during lunchtime. We make choices whether we can take that funding or not. And it is not easy. We don't have that luxury. Yet I sit on that high horse. That's what I told you, no? We sit there and say that if we take this funding, what would we be asked to do or say or write that may not be correct? Not right or wrong. May not be correct. And that's
true.
where
Yep.
we want to talk about social impact, trustworthiness. I will have to ask the other question.
And whose trustworthiness?
Yes.
Who trusts whom? Shruti, do you want to come in here? Because you have.
I think just so beautifully spoken, all of you all. I think I can just add, just to make it a little more concrete, like things, exactly what Brinda was saying, right? The burden is so much on us, especially if you're working on the grassroots. We do have access to communities. It is so easy for a donor to come in and say, why don't you sell a product? right? I will give you so much more money. And like Brinda said, you have to make that choice at that point, saying that's not okay, because the community trusts us to be there for them, right? And yeah, so it's definitely a complicated situation. The other lens that I also think about is the whole non-governmental, but the only way to solve a problem at scale, especially a social problem, is when systems start taking ownership. And how much do we really trust systems? In the introduction, you said somebody who works at the shadows as well as in front of the police systems. And we all know why we work in the shadows. So there is also that element of trust with the systems. There is distrust, and all of this falls into this larger global picture of what's happening, right? Like India is now supposedly a superpower, and we all know what happens. And when that narrative goes out, it's just so much harder to tell people that there is still 40% malnutrition in the community. How is somebody going to believe that? And who has the trust?
Sometimes we make the world bleaker than it already is, I think, but also very real. And I was just looking at, while I was listening to you, and I was saying, the new path to reducing trust deficits. I don't know if a new path is necessary. I don't think the paths have ever been created, because all our paths seem to be very different, right? And it is because we occupy different positions, power, privilege, no power, etc., right? And I think till we begin to actually address those questions, which is what you were saying, right? Fix the foundation. And we haven't been able to do that yet. Forget about as an independent India, we haven't been able to do that yet. I'm just going to ask all of you to take a minute. We don't have too much time, and I would like the audience to come in at some point. Is trust really the right word? Is it really the right concept that we have to be building on? Is that the foundation? Is that the core that requires our attention? Or is it something that is so vague that a whole lot of things can escape or hide behind it? What would you replace it with?
I mean, I don't know if you can talk about a single value which encapsulates all the challenges in the world that we see right now. And trust is, I think, as good as any. You can talk about connections, you can talk about empathy, you can talk about many things. But even if you take trust as simple as that, it's a good example, because in the public sphere, you take media, right? It's characterized by, there is polarization in society, there is like sort of fake narratives, getting fake news, misinformation, and now you actually have, I mean, of course, superficial social media coverage, and to add to all that, now you have AI and it's whatever it's bringing in. So, and then there is no trust in in governments and institutions, right, with broken promises, and we kind of so normalize this lack of trust. Yes, they are like that only. Politicians are corrupt only. Why are we taking this for granted? And you cannot start fixing things if you take things for granted, right? If you normalize all of this. So the only way to deal with all this is to kind of start ground up, not top down, but it has to be bottom up. And how do you get involved? And it is something that I think the onus is on all of us to sort of participate. How do you want, what sort of state do you want, what sort of society do we want, what sort of country do we want? It has to be participatory. We have a stake in our collective future, and therefore we have to, unless we get involved, you can't set the direction. So it has to be, that collective nature comes in only when you engage, which is why the solution to all of this has to start from there.
Correct. So I didn't mean for the question to sound very esoteric or whatever. What I was saying is that words have meaning, and we ascribe meaning to words. And it begins there, and then of course there's a whole lot of things that happen or follow, right? News that you can trust, a builder that you can trust, a politician that you can trust. And we know that there is no trust in any of these scenarios, right? And we know how vocabulary is important. So it is in that nature that I ask, does the word need reimagining? Does the word need to be abandoned and replaced with something else? Because trust, the way it is now, has become normalized in a way that it should not be.
I think we did allow it to get here because you kind of we'd all taken this step back from the public sphere, but I think my colleagues here who have more experience on the ground would be able to share more.
I would love for us to verb the idea of trust differently, because trust is fundamental. We do live with each other. We are a community, and engagement, interaction, respect, everything that one builds with others stems from all of these heavy words like trust and empathy and everything. And trust somewhere becomes a very fundamental tool that breaks bonds as we build and move forward, right? So for me, the way I look at trust and how I try to urge people around, if at all anyone wants to listen to what I say whenever, is to start relationships with trust and build relationships as if trust was a given, right? You stop trusting if you have evidence to stop trusting, unless something has gone wrong and you have, tried to build and bridge from there, but that was not possible. Then think about, oh, do I need to trust this person or not, or this relationship or this politician or whatever. Idea is to start with trust. Now, having said that, I think we also choose whom to trust and whom not to trust. And that again comes with all of the multiple identities that I've been talking about that plays. It's very easy for me to trust someone based on the way they are dressed, the diction of their English language, and what kind of schooling and college and class they come from, right? Because I don't know why, I'm taught or conditioned in some way to start to trust them. And the first break or lack of trust for me if something goes missing is I am taught to go and ask my domestic worker, where is my watch? Because I'm taught not to trust her. So our trust is also very like people and their background specific. That becomes very, very painful for me to understand. And that's why I'm saying we need to start to verb the idea of trust implicitly with everyone and not be selective. And when there's a breakdown of trust, particularly with people with power, I think it becomes a responsibility for all of us to question. So for instance, if at the ward level, the person who I have trusted with whatever that I have done, now I can't go and vote, but whatever, then I must question. If my politician has not done something and has broken trust, I must question those areas of trust. If my manager does not meet my idea of trust, has perhaps looked at me inappropriately, there's been an unsafe, environment for me, those are spaces that I must question because those are my rights. But let's not question people and people who come from marginalization instead. So, yeah. Thank you.
Shruti and Brinda, before I go on to you all, I actually just want to open it up because I noticed, we'll come back to you folks.
1 minute, I'll finish you up, because otherwise I'll forget this train of thought. You asked for another word? No, I can't think of another word.
I'm glad.
This word trust, the other thing that I can closest come to is integrity. And trust is so embedded in our hearts, and it has all the good things. Let it be as it is. We'll hold on to it. What we want to ask ourselves is the narrative from where we are looking at this word. And if I come into a campus like that, it's always a future-proofing businesses. Trust. You look at trustworthiness and say, future-proofing our worlds. Why can't we be compassionate? We are all compassionate. Tell me how many of us have not forgiven our boyfriends, our husbands, our sisters, our mothers, our best friend? And the trust has been built again, no? Of course, we'll bring it up at another point of time saying, that day you did this, so I'm a little careful today. But we never let go of that trust because that will break us. And that cannot happen. We are whole, complete people struggling to hold on to that completeness in today's world every day. So we are not going to have another word. But we must learn to be compassionate and kind to ourselves, because often the narratives that come out every day, especially the WhatsApp that I don't trust at all, but I will forward, that is telling us to disbelieve everybody. The narrative is what we need to shatter and say, we will not go by that. We are inherently, instinctively people who are nurturing and kind. Let's not forget that. Let other people not tell, but why are you not like this? I don't want to be like that. Have the courage of your convictions, and I have the courage of my conviction to say, this is what I am. You see what you get. If you don't like me, next janam I'll change my face. But this janam, I'm going to be like this only. I love you to be my friend, but if you can't be, we'll meet again in 10 years' time.
Thanks, Vidya. Shruti, we are short of time, yeah? So if there's one thing that we left you with today, and you have another days of conference to go, and the theme is trust, I hope we've brought new lenses into what trust means, why it's important, and why we can't let go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So before we let you off the stage, we have some goodies for you. I will request Richa from the Anita B team. And that was a great discussion. Can we please keep the applause going? Yes. Thank you so much.